Okay, just going to give it a second, then I'll go into the intro. Hello, you are listening to Jump and Shoot, a gaming podcast. As always, I'm your host, Joey, and today we have another episode of our Sidequests series, which is a series of live streamed, discussion based podcast episodes that are a little bit of a different format than our regular produced episodes. So we don't really have any kind of major sort of flow chart going on here, just a general topic of the guests choosing. So today I'm joined again with OrpheusJoshua.
Yeah. What's up, man? It's been a while.
Yeah, dude, it's in the words of Stained, it's been a while. So what are we talking about today?
So we're gonna talk about random encounters, is it?
Mm-hmm. That's it. That is definitely it. Fans of Deadpool will be very thrilled for this episode because we're talking about That's So Random encounter.
Oh no.
I hate myself. Um, I don't know if this is like even relevant anymore, but like there was that kind of Invader Zim esque humor. I don't know, like 10, 12 years ago that was just like, haha, random stuff happens. And it's just kind of Molgoth, and I still mock that. I don't even know if that's relevant anymore. So
Yeah. Okay.
okay, so yeah, let's talk about random encounters in JRPGs. Well, not just in JRPGs, but in RPGs in general. Just that they mostly happen to be in JRPGs, right? So what's the last game you played with random encounters?
Um. Well, I'm in the middle of playing FF7 actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Is this your first playthrough of the original, or?
I've never fully gone through the OG game.
Mm. Did
Yeah. So this
you
is like my first full time.
Did you do the thing where you wanted to play it for the remake, and then
I
blasted
tried.
through Midgar?
I tried to play through 7 in the past, but it just like never clicked with me. But I've always known about like what happens just in Midgar.
Mm-hmm.
So I still kind of saw that point of comparison with remake.
So are you playing the like newer releases of FF7 with all the quality of life stuff, or are you playing
Yeah,
a?
yeah, yeah. I'm playing the PS4 version of it. Yeah.
Oh, okay, word. So how are you digging the random encounters in that game then? Like, how is the dynamic working for you?
I'm like it's like in some maps it feels like really frequent, but
Mm-hmm.
for the most part like it's not on the level of like SMT,
Mm-hmm.
but like they're like very specific maps where I guess because like they're very small to walk across normally, they try to substitute that with like a lot more fights.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the only time that Final Fantasy ever really felt like the SMT level of dungeon annoyance, or maybe not annoyance, but like dungeon endurance, I think are like the first three games. Because like FF4 is pretty like you can get as into as many random encounters and never really feels like it's arduous because FF
Yeah.
has is like so check marked by save points where you can use a tent hat or whatever cottage depending on the game, so you can regen HP or MP whenever. Um, so that's kind of nice. I don't think that too many JRPGs, especially like from like 88 until 98, really have that fully. Like Fantasy Star definitely doesn't. Uh, SMT definitely doesn't. Persona even doesn't because that's a different kind of system.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, have you been using the? Have you been turning off the encounters ever, or what's the? How does that function play into your playthrough?
I've just been using like the turbo for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that just kind of like mitigates any like real problems that come with the encounter rate. I think like I haven't turned off encounters yet because I think that's like a bit too much of
It's
like a step,
cheating.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. The only time I think it's relevant in that game is like when you have to backtrack to Fort Condor. That's I
Mhm.
don't even give a shit. I don't even feel bad turning off random encounters for that because that's just like you don't have to sit through 30 minutes of like mook enemies just to go get a fucking ether at Fort Condor. So, yeah, Captain Howdy says that turbo is necessary in the year of our Lord 2021 when thus his light would shine upon us. And yeah, I definitely agree. Like any older JRPG, I think that gets a remaster just benefits so much from it. I
Yeah.
just recently played through the Saga Frontier remaster, and like, yeah, that just like totally makes it. And now I'm playing through the Dragon Quest games again, and I'm on Dragon Quest 6, and I'm real hurting for the turbo on that. It just doesn't exist.
Which version are you playing of 6?
You
Mobile?
trying to take my gamer card?
No, no, I'm just curious.
No, it's the mobile version. I'm just fucking with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I don't have the DS version, and I don't want to emulate it. It's kind of convenient because I could play it on my couch, and it actually looks pretty good.
Oh, okay.
So there it is. There's my gamer card. It's gone. This podcast is now completely without authority. But yeah, no, it's like stuff like I don't really think the turbo really it feels like a cheat in those kind of games unless it like breaks some kind of mechanic, like it
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
something really easy. But I think for the most part, it makes mini games or whatever, what have you, in those games harder. So it's like I don't feel like it's a cheat.
Yeah, like I like like compared to like what the others like cheats are for 7 and like I think like 8 and 9 have it too on like PS4 and PC. Like there's like
Mhm.
a god mode I think where you're like always at limit break and then there's no encounters, you know? Like
Mm.
I think just having the turbo just like helps it just helps save you time, you know? Like it doesn't really affect the actual challenge at all.
Right. It's funny though because you can argue that same thing about the God mode. It just depends on how deeply you
Yeah,
stretch.
that's true.
Because like if
Yeah.
it's like if you're farming for limit breaks, is it really that much of a cheat? Because it's like you'd be fighting like to more efficiently fight or to more efficiently gain and farm limit breaks. You would just kind of go into an area where you can blast everything anyway, uh,
Mhm.
and then just build up your limit and use it. So like the God mode just kind of expedites that. Like there's never any challenge in it. I don't know. I'm just playing devil's advocate
Yeah, yeah.
personally, but uh, yeah, I don't. I just don't. It just doesn't feel right. I think it's like I'm glad it's there because I know that a lot of people want to experience those games without sort of the archaic, like vestigial elements of JRPGs, and they just want to
Yeah.
see the story. So I'm glad that that exists. But I'm still of the mind that it should. I think anything besides the turbo should disable trophies.
Trophies?
Mm-hmm.
I think they do that for 9, right?
No, as far as
No,
I know.
really. Oh, wow.
Mm.
Okay.
At least I don't think so. Yeah, because I did the thing in 9 where I I wrote a script, so it just auto battles to try to max out Marcus's level. Because if you max out Marcus's level in that area, it like gives some of his stats to Ico. And I've never done that before, so I wanted to
Mm,
I wanted to do it.
wow.
And I put
That's
the auto
intense.
battle on or the God mode on, so I wouldn't die when I was running the
Mhm.
script. Oh wait, no, you know what it is? I think what you're thinking of I think there's like a thing that gives you money and that disables the guild trophy.
Oh,
Or maybe
okay.
there's like 99 of it. I think there's something like that in 8 and 9. Maybe even 7 too. So, and that's just like, come on, man. Do you really need that? Do you really need that? But yeah, sorry, that's getting away from the point. I do think this actually does have relevance here because like this kind of stuff does tie into random encounters. So I guess like historically, random encounters were there for technological limitations of the time, right? And then B, also, it was sort of meant to emulate as a randomness that like sort of functioned as a substitute DM for like D&D, because all these old JRPGs were in essence uh, founded on the fundamentals of D&D. So it's sort of there to just like kind of roll the dice in a way to see if you get encounters, blah blah blah. And then third, it was definitely there to pad out a lot of the game.
Yeah.
So like,
Especially with like those like really small map sizes, you know?
mm-hmm. uh, like yeah, because you were saying this about FF7 as well, and it still applies to a game that around that time for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the most part, I think like in those a lot of the NES JRPGs, random encounters were definitely a way to sort of wear you down as you traverse a dungeon or overworld or whatever. But I think it kind of works really interestingly because, okay, a really good example of this is the first Final Fantasy or even Phantasy Star or Dragon Quest One, the big three, right? Where you can stumble across one little pixel and then run into an enemy that's like 17 times stronger than you. And
Mhm.
I kind of like that.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
like, how do you feel about it?
from you, I'm not surprised that you like that. I like I'm not like from a current like from a current perspective, like I find it like kind of dumb because
Mm-hmm.
like they're well like the thing is for back then like those type like that type of design choice is there because of like it's to help enhance like well not really like not replay ability but just like getting to know the map and what's safe and what's not safe. Like there's more because like they had to like play around a lot more with the limited systems they had back then.
Totally.
So like yeah. So like having those like types of spikes could help you with like make it like a help like pad time, you know? But now it's like there's not really like any like real reason for that, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't like, if you were to make a JRPG with random encounters in the year of our Lord 2021, the year that our light has diminished, then yeah, I think like having, like one pixel be level 1 enemies and the next pixel be level 69 enemies, like I think that probably doesn't work, but you do see that kind of mechanic still in modern games. Kind of see it in Breath of the Wild even, where you can, you fight
Mhm.
guardians. You see it really big in Xenoblade. Uh,
Yeah, Xenoblade fucking loves loves that shit a lot.
but I mean, it's a
Though in
little
case,
different
yeah,
because it's like you can
like
see the enemy and
yeah,
what
yeah, yeah,
it's there
yeah.
to some extent. Mm.
Like there's like a those like few types of enemies where like they attack you if they see you, but like they're like very few and you're able to like pretty easily avoid them too. Like it's not like it's like purely random.
Right. So I like that a lot. I just gonna put my cards on the table. I do think random encounters are a very archaic thing, and I don't really think using them nowadays is ever like super a good idea. I can probably think of a
Yeah,
couple exceptions. But I mean, me personally, I think those days are sort of long gone. Uh,
yeah. Like I can't really think of like the last like mainstream RPG that had purely random counters. Like the most you ever see now is like they're on the map.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, even is there any real examples of this? Sorry, I was pointing my cactuar because
Oh,
there's in the chat. But can you think of any like real like RPGs that have come out in the last like couple years that actually use random encounters?
um, does I am Setsuna count? I don't know
Hmm.
if that count. Oh wait,
Yeah,
no, that had
no, the head
the
on that.
map.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can't really like think of like I don't know.
I think the
I don't
only
know if
one I
there's been other
really
ones.
think of is Bravely Default 1 and 2.
Oh yeah, that's true.
That's really the only one that I could be just drawing a blank though. But there. So before we talk about the bad of that, let's discuss a little bit about what's good about it first. So apart from I think like kind of forcing you to pay attention to your resources throughout dungeons, as we've discussed a little bit, there's this sort of like because you can pretty much go through some floors in older RPGs and just like get one or two battles, and then you can have my luck in every step is a random battle. So there's I almost kind of like that randomness, even though it's not fully random because RNG for these things is never purely random. There's always some kind of like balancing algorithm.
Yeah.
So
like, I think you're the type of player who like they don't like being in control, if that makes sense. Like you like the game putting up a fight.
Oh yeah, well, I like being in control, but I think it depends on the game. Like an action RPG where you feel like you're not in control, that sucks. I don't want that. I don't want to be like thrown into like a bunch of random shit. Oh yeah, no, Octopath Traveler. Sorry, that's the exception.
Yeah, Octopath. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just completely forgot about that. But you do get something super early on in that game that lets you severely diminish the amount of encounters that you get into. So that's kind of nice at least. But yeah, no, I don't like. I think with, I mean, again, ideally, I would like to see something like on map. That's my ideal thing. But like, let's say there was a remaster of FF1, and let's just say it took the Dawn of Souls / Wonder Swan / mobile whatever version of the game, and kept everything the same, except it added on-map encounters, right? That would be really weird, I think. I don't think that would work super well for that game because it was designed in it like around that mechanic almost, right?
Yeah.
But then like again, like going back to the beginning of this episode when we were saying we were talking about the FF7 remaster or port, whatever. FF7 port where you kind of have control over that. It does still fundamentally change the game in a way. You don't have to worry so much about certain things. But it adds this level of diversity to your encounters that you don't really see on map. Like you never know what to expect, basically. And you have to sort of adjust to that. And I think that that's a really interesting dynamic. I just think more often than not, it gets annoying in older games. And I think the best example of this is like when you're like going through a dungeon and then you're like, oh, I'm a little lost. I think the way I'm supposed to go is back down. So then you start going back down and you get into a random encounter that's kind of tough.
Yeah.
And you clear it and then you're like, oh shit, where was I going again? And then it just becomes arduous. Like it's just like, fuck, well, I just want to go up. Like, so I think that's there's some kind of balance. I think I think you kind of see some older games understand this and try to adapt and I think the best example that's on the tip of everyone's tongue in this conversation is Saga, because Saga started out having random encounters in the first 3 games, and then starting with Romancing Saga 1, it started putting on-map encounters. And was it the best rolling out of that in Romancing Saga 1? Not really, because they're super erratic. And they just like didn't know how to design it super well. So there's like 5,000 enemies that swarm you in the Super Famicom version. Romancing Saga 2 and 3 also have this to much lesser extents, especially Romancing Saga 3. By then, I think the formula had gotten more refined and they realized that just throwing 8,000 enemies on the field is just as annoying as having random encounters. But they kind of also balance that with with 2 and 3 by allowing you to flee from them whenever. Pretty much is like 100%. You mean you can't run from like mini bosses or bosses, obviously, but you can run from most encounters, which is nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that they really got like a. I don't think developers in general really got a good idea for how to do on map encounters until you started seeing. I would say even Kingdom Hearts. To be honest, I think that was like the first RPG that like really changed the paradigm, where it was like, okay, now everything is like, this is a mainstream action RPG, and everything is set up in a way that like an action game kind of would, in a way, because there's still the essence of on map encounters, right, in that game, where there's like a randomness to where enemies spawn.
Yeah. I forgot that like FF10 was purely random too, right? Like it didn't have map stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, it didn't have any
It,
map stuff. There's like a
that's like the
couple like
last.
exceptions though there.
I think that was the last main line to do that, right? Was 10?
Yeah.
Oh wow. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about. Oh wait, no, 10-2. I don't know if you're counting that.
Oh yeah, 10. I thought 10-2 had map, right? No.
Wait,
Oh,
no, I'm pretty
okay.
sure they had random encounter. I could be wrong. It's been
Okay.
a long time since I played 10-2.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, that is wild to sort of think about. The spin-offs had them, but some spin-offs did, but yeah, as a whole. So, yeah, I don't know, because I'm getting the impression that you kind of, and I've seen like some of your streams where you play older games, where I can tell that the random encounters drive you a little bonkers.
They're a little annoying, yeah. Like it's like especially when it comes to when you're like to like when you're streaming a game, like um
Oh yeah.
it gets a lot more frustrating in that kind of context, but like even like just normally it can get kind of aggravating.
Yeah. Oh, this is a really good point, actually, in the chat here. Sort of like mazy games that have these Phantasy Star One,
Okay.
the Etrian Odyssey series, early SMT, and even before SMT was or just Digital Devil Story 1 and 2. Those have it really hardcore. Yeah, again, Etrian Odyssey. I'm sure there's a couple that I'm forgetting here. I think that random encounters work really well because those games are designed more like a traditional pen and paper RPG. So it feels a little different. But I don't know. I don't really like those games that much. I mean, I love Phantasy Star, but like Etrian Odyssey, like I dig it, but I'm not like a huge fan, if that makes sense.
Why not?
I don't know. I just think something. I don't like navigating mazes in first person very much.
Yeah. I'm not sure if you played either of the Persona Q games.
No, I have
It's like
not.
the same, it's like the same kind of like I think it's the same team that made Etrian Odyssey. But like
Oh yeah.
some of those fucking areas, like especially in the first game, there's like some like very like infamous areas where um but actually I think a better example is like Strange Journey. Like
Mm.
there's I forgot the name of the particular place, but it has like those like those like floor puzzles where
Oh
you
yeah.
walk on one side and it like swerves you around like that kind of shit.
Yeah. Strange Journey is like very hit or miss for people I've
Yeah,
noticed.
I played it I played Redux. It was really good. But like I've heard the OG is like a lot more like fucked up. Like to
Yeah. No, I
play.
only played the Redux as well. I never played the original. Uh, it's one of those things where it's like I kind of want to, but I just there's so many things to play. I'd rather just
Mhm.
maybe one day. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, I don't know, something about like just making maps. I have like a spatial awareness issue. Like I really have issues seeing like just being spatially aware.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if it's like neurological or it has to do with my eyesight. I don't know, but I think with navigating dungeons for me is especially annoying. And I do remember making maps for these games, like Phantasy Star 1. I did the first time I played Digital Devil Story. I brought up MS Paint and I was like drawing
Oh
along where
no.
I'm going, and it's like I think it's cool in a way. I just just it's just an extra step that I just don't feel like taking anymore. I'm just too old. I'm too old, but I'm not old enough to where I want to, because I feel like wanting to draw maps makes you old.
You're in that gap.
Mm-hmm. A
You're about to
cuspian.
approach that age.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Caspian.
Yeah. Maybe in like 10 years, get graphing paper.
Wrapping paper. It's-
I mean, that's what I did. I hate it. I hate it. But yeah, I only played, I think, the first four Etrian Odyssey games. I don't think I played anything after that. All have really good music, though.
Yeah, the really great soundtracks. Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that random encounters uh, have relevance in that genre or that subgenre for
Yeah, like
sure.
when it's all about like exploring an area, like you kind of have to throw in some kind of caveat.
Hmm. What about any games that have random encounters that you think do it really well or that you don't mind it in?
Um, Honestly, maybe Bravely,
Mm-hmm.
because in Bravely, it's like I forget if the first game had this, but in Bravely second, they had this mechanic where you were able to like adjust
Yeah, you had that in the first.
the rate. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah, and like depending on like how high the rate was, you get more shit. Like it felt like a very fair way to balance it.
Mm-hmm. Wait, did you get more rewards in Bravely Second if you
I
had
think
a
it's
high?
like they had those like encounters where I forget what it was. Like I think it's like if you walked into an encounter and there were multiple fights, if you stuck with those fights, like
Oh
one
yeah,
after the other, you would get more shit. Yeah,
I see. Yeah, they brought that over to Bravely Default too, but they did like an on map version of it,
yeah,
which
yeah.
we'll get into a little bit later. Oh yeah, Radiant Historia. Yahiko says, yeah,
Oh,
that's a
Radiant
really good example.
Storia. Yeah,
Really good
yeah. That's a really
example.
great example. Yeah, yeah.
But I think it's like the level design in that game was just so succinct. It was just very
Very
streamlined.
compact. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
And not like in a I'm not using that word like in a bad way. It just really was like yeah, just really well designed. Um, I don't think it's a big problem in any Final Fantasy after 4 personally. Sometimes it does get annoying in some of the middle of the road games. Like, oh, it is awful in FF8 because
Oh yeah, it's really bad in eight. It's really bad in eight.
it's really bad in
Yeah,
8 because there are those missions that are I guess that's not that big of a deal, but like the big problem is the scaling thing. So it's
yeah.
like sometimes you just like can't run and it's just it's awful. I think that's the only time that I really truly can't stand because I had to do a level 1 playthrough of FF8 for an achievement and I don't think that would have really been possible in the same way on the original version. Like it's possible, but it's just way more. It would be way more annoying. You'd have to do resets if you got into an encounter that you couldn't run from, or like you tried to
Yeah,
run
that's
and then
really
you
good.
got killed doing it. Um, yeah. Any other examples of good use of random encounters that you can think of?
Uh, I don't know, they all kind of feel the same to me. Like for the most part, like they just kind of like I haven't really played as turn-based games as I have for action, so I don't really have like as wide of a pool to like think from. But like for the most part, I think they all kind of feel the same,
Mhm.
except for like Metroid, like for like Metroid Odyssey and those games where like they like it feels designed around those aspects. But like for stuff like even like FF like I don't know like 10 maybe, right? Like those maps are like they feel like they feel pretty long in 10,
Yeah.
and sometimes the encounters don't really feel like they're necessary in 10.
Yeah. 100%. I remember getting really annoyed with it the last time I played 10. I
Yeah.
think it's like because okay, here's the thing. If your battle system rewards a lot of I guess if there's like a carrot at the end of the stick for battles, a bigger carrot at the end of the stick for battles, I feel like the random encounter stuff doesn't feel as bad. So let's think of
Yeah.
an example of this. So, Dragon Quest VI, which I'm playing right now, it introduces a job system in this game where so you have your regular base level and then you have like your job mastery level or whatever, right? And it's really similar to Final Fantasy III, where your job level goes up. Well, FF3 is based on actions, but in FF6 or Dragon Quest VI, your job level goes up per X number of battles that you complete. So even with the random encounters, you have an incentive to fight these random encounters beyond just levels and experience. You know, you're getting this added progression system, and I think that works really well. And then there's something like FF5 or FF3 to some extent, and Bravely, where Bravely is kind of like on the fence here because it has the option to turn off the encounters. But those games, they give you job points or a resource that increases your job
Yeah.
level. So I feel like, at least this is just my opinion, I feel like I don't get as annoyed getting into more battles like that.
Yeah, like if you have jobs or like something that's like jobs, like it's a lot more easy to get invested, like because there's more of a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because like if like I recently played Dragon Quest 11S, and it's a really fucking great game. But when it comes to like all of the fights it has, like I'd say like 90% of the encounters you could have, they just like there's just no real reason for it, like because all you have are your skill points, which are dependent on when you level up.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing you really gain when you fight battles is just like basic
Money and XP.
experience, and that's just kind of yeah, and money too, and then that just that's just kind of it.
Yeah, so I actually I'll get to Dragon Quest 11 because I think it's a really good example of something that we will end up talking about a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily that encounters have to reward or add progression to a secondary or tertiary progression system, but I do think that depending on the game, that could be really good. Because like FF5 without something like that, like if you got I don't know job points just from level ups in FF5, I don't think that wouldn't really work super well. But like
Mhm.
in non-job neat games, like we don't have jobs, it's a little different. Like so, yeah, I don't know. But let's go back to Dragon Quest 11 because I think that Dragon Quest 11 is one of my examples for like how to best do encounters
Yeah,
because this is and you know what, I haven't really played the 11S version too much. I
it's
just
it's the same fucking game. It's the same
right.
game
Um,
for the most part. Yeah.
wait, do the 2D sections have random encounters or they're on map? They're on map, right?
Oh, no, they're random.
Oh, they're random. Oh shit. Okay, so
I
that
forgot
changes.
about that shit. Yeah, they're all random. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um.
I forgot all about that. Yeah, there's I played like the main game in 3D, but I if you go to like there's like this village where it takes you to like these altars of all the past games, and it's all in 2D, so like it's all just like all Dragon Quest with the encounters. But I
Yeah.
think if you play the main game in 2D, it's also random.
Mm. And that changes the pace of 11 considerably.
Yeah, yeah,
Um. Here's a good point in the chat too: is the idea of pacing. So, all right. If you're playing a game that has heavy random encounters and fleeing is very dangerous, really good example of this is Final Fantasy III. So when you run in this game, you take increased. I don't remember if your defense just drops or if you just take increased damage, but when you try to flee, you take more damage or you have a higher chance to take damage. So fleeing is kind of dangerous at times. Even in the first 9 Dragon Quest games, sometimes fleeing is really dangerous too, because you can fight an enemy that can like blast your whole party with one of the made up little Timmy magic spell names in Dragon Quest. Your whole party gets banged, you know,
Mhm.
and you end up taking a shitload of damage. There's like risk versus reward element. But even still, like I like the idea of being able to play games at like the character level that you want to be at. So if I want to
Yeah.
be level 7 through the end of the game and I want to challenge myself, I should have a sort of a means to do that without the arduousness of random encounters, right?
You'd fucking love Kingdom Hearts.
Oh yeah, because
And,
you could do
and,
that in that.
and all of those games, you could turn off EXP.
Yeah,
So
and the
yeah.
Xenoblade, the remaster has that as well, which we
Oh, yeah,
always.
that too. Yeah, and Xenoblade. Yeah.
So I think that that's awesome. But like, yeah, so like older games that have random encounters, sometimes you really do feel forced into these things. And this is why I really, really like Romancing Saga 3, because it allows you to run from any encounter.
Yeah,
And it doesn't,
I've done that a lot in Saga 3. I just fucking run.
yeah, yeah, it's like the only problem with that is that like it almost kind of trivializes. It's like you're running from every encounter except the ones you want to fight, so it really does
Yeah,
kind of feel almost too powerful.
yeah,
Um, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, if you're running too much, then you won't have good techs, and then you fight a boss, and then it's like, oh shit, I don't have anything to damage this thing with. But the game does kind of try to balance that by allowing you to tech new skills off higher level enemies. So that was definitely that was definitely something that the developers I think were aware of. Oh, and in the chat here, I'm playing FF8 right now, and the success rate for fleeing is way less than I'd have thought. Yeah, see, that's what I was saying earlier. That's really annoying in a game with scaling enemies. Nobody
oh
wants
yeah.
it. Nobody wants that. Should be like 90% or something.
I wonder how 8
Oh,
would be.
DQ8.
If,
Sorry, he
oh,
said
okay.
DQ8. My bad. My bad.
I wonder if like how 8 would be if it didn't have the scaling.
Hmm. This is a question as old as time itself, or as old as
Yeah,
FF8 itself.
because like
Huh.
I like really love the 8 mechanics for them. Like I fucking love junctioning a lot. I think it's really cool. And I like how they handle the GFs a lot. But like I feel like you could like there's rarely ever a reason to like really go out of your way to master them because of how the scaling works, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, because you either completely trivialize encounters or you die in on the first turn.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
kind of like what FF8 is. Yeah. Um. So yeah, I just see this is again. I'll just always go back to Saga because I think it's one of the series that does this really well. Where Saga just really, because it scales too. It has scaling systems, and it can make some things really easy for you because it can make some of the harder bosses a little bit easier because they're at a lower level and they have less HP, and you don't have to deal with their bullshit for as long. But then you're also getting one shot, right? Your strategy changes, and I think that game JRPGs really could, I guess, spend more time working on that, right? And again, the Xenoblade slash Bravely slash Kingdom Hearts thing is really interesting because being able to stockpile XP or just have control over encounters, it does add another level of like personal self-induced challenge that gives a more diverse
Yeah.
game experience overall. So it's like I don't really ever see the the negatives in being able to not level up. You know, like to have the choice to not get XP. So like that's why like if I was trying to play, I mean, not that I even do this because like despite my seemingly masochistic tendencies, I don't really do our JRPG challenge runs. You know, like I try not to use overpowered shit as you know when I can, unless the game is bullshit. But I mean that's that's a me thing. But like, Dragon Quest is a good example of this too, because it's like if you want to play through that game at a certain level, or if you want to do it with like, you know, how you want to play it, like the game doesn't make it easy to do that. It kind of imposes a very specific progression on you, the player,
Yeah,
and
it's
that's why.
pretty linear. Yeah.
Yeah, it's linear in all ways, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. It's because I think a lot of times that people talk about linearity, they talk about like they'll bring up FF13 or
Yeah.
FF10,
Yeah.
where it's like you're on your hallway simulator bullshit. You know,
Well, funnily enough, like now that you bring those up, like from a gameplay standpoint, they're like the complete opposite of that.
so I kind of disagree because I think FF10, like, yeah, you have a giant sphere grid, right, with a ton of different
Yeah.
options, but you don't really get a lot of diversity, as much diversity as it seems, because you don't start getting enough SP or whatever the thing is
Yeah.
to whatever your sphere points. You don't really start getting enough of that to where your stat gains really matter until like the mid game. And at that point, you know, you have so many other options, it doesn't really matter that much. And then FF13 straight up hard limits you from leveling up a certain point and being
Oh
diverse
yeah.
with your builds.
Yeah. I
So
forgot it does
it's,
that.
yeah, it's like 10 is
13, like when you reach like the end of 13, like you all like they all get the fucking like all the jobs or like
yeah,
all the
like all at
roles.
once.
But up until that point, like it's pretty linear, yeah.
Yeah, so like in a way, I do think those games, even from a gameplay standpoint, are linear. I mean, I'm not saying that FF7 wasn't. I'm not saying FF8 wasn't, but like, because I think people tend to overrate the non-linearity of one FF1 through 10, and they also tend to overrate the linearity of 10 through 15, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
10 is more linear than 13. Don't ask me to elaborate. I don't.
Oh,
It's close
I mean,
though.
like
It's close.
13 and 10, like they both have like they're actually really similar now that I think about it with how they are in that way because they both have that like very like hallway like structure until you reach
Certain
like
point.
the ends like the like near around the like around the climax like the Comlands and whatever that place is for 13, that like big field area.
Grand Pulse.
Yeah. And like and like so much shit opens up.
Yeah.
And I
So
guess
you know what
there's
13 is
yeah.
probably. Yeah. Now that you say that, I guess like technically, yeah, it is because that opening is more extreme. I think
13
than
has a lot more and like at that point, yeah, than 10 does.
yeah, but like the rest of the game, I think 10 does feel more open.
Yeah.
So it's like because you're able to go back
Also
earlier.
in 10 it's like one continuous experience where in 13 like you like switch back and forth and they like between like duos each chapter so they feel very self-contained.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that adds linearity to the first. I can like it's like it just literally comes down to that last 10%, the last 10% of the game.
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But sorry, that's straying from the point.
Mm.
But yeah, I do think linearity does have an effect on this topic of random encounters because it sort of forces you to play in a certain way. Another example is let's talk about FF4 DS. That
Oh
end
god.
game, it starts throwing random encounters at you that you can't mash through.
Yeah.
And now, personally, I love that, but like, if I could see why people get annoyed by it because they just want to like the rest of
DS
the
is
game is
like
so easy.
FF4 so that was the first version of 4 that I played through and like I distinctly recall like having a pretty easy time for like the first like 80% of the game, and then I reached that point and I was like, what the fuck is going on?
I mean, once the story WTFs you, then the gameplay kind of does too a little bit. So there's like
Yeah.
interesting form function thing here.
Oh, have you heard so on the mobile stores, I think for iOS and Android, they renamed
Oh, to 3D
um
remake.
yeah.
That's
I'm kind of
because
curious why they
the reason why is because they're making my
oh
fan fiction canon.
oh
So they
no.
wanted to differentiate on the store that this is the remake and
Mhm.
that mine is canon. The version where Kane, Cecil, and Rosa fuck is canon.
Oh my God, the threesome dream.
That's what's up. I'm kidding. I've never written fan fiction. No shade on anyone who has, but that's not.
I kind of hope I kind of hope they port like I'm not sure if they'll bring it to like consoles and stuff, like probably not, but like I want them to bring over the PSP collection of 4.
I would love that, and that has
Yeah,
random encounters that you
yeah,
can't
let's do.
fuck with. Uh, hmm. So, what is the ideal way to do this? How do we have? What is the ideal battle encounter system for you? This is the meat right here.
Like just like in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think just like seeing enemies on the map is kind of like my ideal, and that's kind of where games now. Well, it's like where games are nowadays. Like Persona, Dragon Quest, Xenoblade, like all these games. Like even if they are still turn-based, they rely on you seeing the enemies on the map now.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's like those like times when like in like Dragon Quest 11 and like Xenoblade, where if you like encounter like there's like very specific types of enemies that will always like go to attack you, like if they see you or if you're too low level. So there's like kind of like the best of on both worlds. They're kind of so like it's like kind of random, like
Mm-hmm.
sorta, depending on like if like what kind of enemy is there, but you still have like enough control to like do what you want.
Right. Uh, Saga again ahead of its time because it had different enemy types that each had different AI.
Yeah.
So like the birds, I mean, granted, the end result was most of them kind of doing like a clusterfuck thing, but like the birds would like kind of avoid you and go in a circle, and some of them beeline right to you, and so okay, I like that idea a lot. I like the idea of like some enemies being more aggro, some enemies being more passive,
Yeah.
they having different patterns.
I really love how Xenoblade handles it. Like I forget if 2 did. I think 2 probably does it too. But in the first game, like there's like those different types of icons that the enemies have. So like
Right? Yeah.
they'll attack you if they like hear you, like if you're loud, or if they see you, they'll go. Like I think that's actually really fucking smart.
You know where that comes from?
What Saga?
No, it's a trigger topic for you. It comes from MMOs.
Oh no, MMOs,
You
my least
just
favorite.
admitted to liking something about an MMO. I got you. I trapped you.
Yeah, you got me. Yeah,
Yeah, I really like that though. I think that's cool. That's one of my favorite things about Xenoblade is just the way the map design is in those games. Where,
yeah.
and that extends kind of to what I was saying before about like the disparity between enemy levels. Like you'll sometimes like have a super fucking strong enemy that's basically a stage hazard, and if you run into it, you're dead. And then there's like a bunch of little mook enemies that are just serve to annoy you, and then you have like
Oh my god,
enemies your level.
there
So
was there's this one enemy in the Gar Plains of the first game. It's like on that like hill thing, and
the
it's like in like the
gorilla,
fucking 80s. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. That guy. And
Territorial Rothbart.
there's this fucking quest where you have to go behind
I
it
forgot his
somehow,
name.
and like
Yeah.
I was
Mm-hmm.
I was like, what the fuck do I do? Because like the quest had a fucking timer, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
how the hell do I go behind there? Then I was like, oh, you fucking go behind and you blow up the. I was like, oh, that fucking blew my mind.
But it teaches you a mechanic. You know, like
Yeah.
I like that. It shows through example, and like it's not just spoon fed to you. You know,
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of awesome. Could it have been not timed? Yeah, probably. The same effect would have been carried or conveyed through that. But yeah, I do like that because it's like it teaches you to like stealth behind an enemy that's super high level and be careful.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, no, I think Xenoblade does it really, really well. But it's a little different with an action RPG just because the battle system is just a different cadence than like a turn-based
Mhm.
thing. And I think like pretty much any turn random encounters almost exclusively exists in turn-based JRPGs. There's stuff like Tales of Fantasia and even some of the other Tales games that don't have it. Or we talked a little bit about the Kingdom Hearts thing. Some enemies kind of just like spawn in ease. There's a lot of examples of like a soft random encounter in non-turn-based RPGs, but for the most part, that's the context. I think Dragon Quest again. I'll bring this back to Dragon Quest 11 because I think that it had a really, really good dynamic. So it's like if you want to avoid things and you want to stay at a certain level, you can do that because enemies are easy enough to avoid. It added a bit of action to the game because if you hit the enemy, you go into
Yeah.
you can stun it or whatever and go into combat. And this is a thing that was in Persona 5 and a bunch of other games as well. And then it also added some quality of life stuff, like if you were too high, if you like smoked way too much weed and then ran an enemy, like the enemies would run from you,
Yeah.
or you can do the Earthbound thing where you hit them and then they die instantly, which is cool.
Yeah.
So it removes a lot of the tedium. The
11
only
has like
Go ahead.
11 has like one of like the weirdest things I've seen where you're able to walk around the battle map for some reason,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh,
and I'm not sure
yeah,
why they like make that thing.
yeah. I think that's just like Unreal Engine. I think they're
Uh,
just like, yeah, we might as well just not try to force it on the player. You fuck with them. Here you go. I think it's like kind of like an RP, like a role playing sort of thing. It's like you could put yourself more. I do. This is my hot take. I do think that should have been more prevalent in the battle system. I think
like positioning and
positioning,
stuff. You mean? That'd be really cool. Yeah.
kind of like Trails a little bit. How Trails kind of does it, where it's not
Maybe 12 would
super
do that.
important. Yeah, because it's not
12 would
like
do that. Yeah.
integral to you can like especially on lower difficulties you can play through all of Trails without ever even needing to
Thinking
move your
about it.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah, I really like Dragon Quest. I think like if you're gonna ask me to choose like a turn-based RPG that has the best random encounter system, it's probably gonna be Dragon Quest 11. It's just a really well designed thing. That being said, I do think that it adds so much freedom where dungeons don't feel dangerous anymore.
Yeah. They don't feel any. That's like the main problem I think. Like even with like the on Bravely games where because you have the option to like just turn off all encounters, like that kind of removes the tension a bit, and that's kind
Right.
of
And it's up to
that
the
kind of
player
breaks up the
still
argument. Yeah, yeah,
to decide whether or not you want to use it. But to give a tool that powerful, it's like, it's obviously. So people always say this thing like, oh, you don't have to use it. You
yeah.
don't
Like
have
I
to
don't,
use it. Well, okay, things aren't just fucking thrown in the game just so like people can fuck with the settings. Like that's like being like I don't know. Like there's a reason why there's
like
not God mode
there's
in games.
I like it may sound pretty like petty, but I think just having like that kind of that like just having that safety net is like kind of like it kind of takes away from it a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Like in Kingdom Hearts 3, they added this item called the Cripple Coin, where you could only hold one at a time, but if you died, you would come back to life. And this was like fucking like real controversial because
Hmm.
you could use it in the boss fights and like even in like the super boss fights too, and like people were like, oh, because you have the choice, you don't have to take it, but like people still think that having the choice there at all is like kind of dumb. But then, when they made the DLC, they made this new boss fight where he could fucking steal the Koopa coin, and if you kill him, he comes back with it. So they fucking
I like
knew.
that actually. That's kind of awesome. That's actually really cool. That adds like a lot of dynamism to the game. I still haven't played
Yeah,
Kingdom Hearts 3 yet, by the way.
you probably shouldn't play through. Probably.
Well, okay, so I've said this to you before, and I'm going to air my dirty laundry. I hate everything about Kingdom Hearts except the combat. So, like, three's combat looks kind of sick. From what I hear, like, the gameplay
But
is
I
great.
got. I'm fucking so mad at fucking Square right now.
Oh, yeah,
They
I saw your tweets about.
they fucking it's so like so they the mobile game for Kingdom Hearts like the final story update it came out like a few weeks ago. It's fucking done in Japan, and for like the past like couple of months they were like fucking like busting their asses to like match up the game versions. So like in the West we would also get the same the we'd get the story at the same time as Japan. And then for the final update, fucking like silence, like no tweets. It's been a fucking week now, and they haven't said shit, and people are so fucking mad.
That
Oh my
sucks.
god,
Yeah,
it's
that
so
sucks.
bad, it's so bad,
If I cared at all about Kingdom Hearts beyond the combat, I would be pissed about that.
so bad.
I can see why that's irritating. It's even irritating for me to hear it, and I don't. It's not
Yeah,
something that I care about. But yeah, the the whole thing about like it's there, you don't have to use it. I think that sometimes has relevance, but like I think it only has relevance if the game is designed with that in mind,
yeah,
right? Like again, that's going back to the not or the turning off random encounters in the FF ports, or remaking FF1 with on-map encounters, or just things like that like weren't in the original release that sort of retroactively were added. It kind of upsets the game design. So an example of this is okay, Saga Frontier, right? In the original Saga Frontier, you could not run from battles. Like you just couldn't. It wasn't there. And the reason why it wasn't there was
oh boy.
because of technical limitations. They
Uh-huh.
couldn't find a way for you to run from battle and everything retains. It was like probably something to do with working with the disk drive and whatever, rushed budget. There's so many different things that could affect it. But the game was essentially designed with being able to flee from encounters in mind. So
Yeah,
it wasn't until like mid to late in development where they had to scrap that. So a lot of the game was a lot of the dungeon design was still designed under this pretense that you could run from battles. So with the remaster, they added that option so you can run from pretty much any battle. Again, that's not a mini boss or a special event or a boss.
uh-huh.
And it changes the game like drastically. Drastically. And then you're stuck in this balancing act of how intentional is this versus how overpowered is this, because it really does make
Yeah,
the game like very very easy, but at the same time it was kind of designed with that in mind. So it's like I don't know, man. I don't have an answer. It just depends on the player
yeah.
at that
There's
point.
like yeah. Like I think like even though I'm not like always the biggest fan of it, like always having the option is probably the best thing. Like
Hmm.
we just
I
kind of
agree.
have to fucking get over it. Like
Yeah,
just having the option there.
I
But
agree.
have you heard of the rumor for the Final Fantasy One
Oh,
Dark
Origin.
Souls game?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, that's getting
How
a
do you
little
feel about
off
that?
point, but I do think it's a remake or reimagining or something of FF1. I think that's what it is. Um, you heard it here,
Oh boy.
folks. I tweeted about this actually, so
Yeah.
my my clairvoyance is etched in stone. But yeah, sorry, yeah, going back to like optional things too, because I think this is a really important topic because it correlate. It's funny because like all the games that we have both sort of unanimously decided like do encounters really well all have some kind of control over encounters. Like Xenoblade has the XP thing, which it doesn't, I guess, directly relate to actually getting in encounters, but it does affect like the cadence of battle. Then you have Dragon Quest 11, and then you have Saga. All these things have like the idea of taking battles at your own pace is in the hands of the player. You know, like, so I don't know. I think my ideal thing would be something like Dragon Quest 11 with more forced encounters. So for the
Yeah.
most part, you can run or like juke enemies. I wish that like on map encounters were a little bit more action oriented. It doesn't have to be like Devil May Cry or like even Zelda or something where you're whatever. But there should be like different mechanics or something that you get. Like maybe you can use like uh on map spells like Golden Sun or Lufia to like distract
That'd be
enemies. Something
that'd be
like
really
that.
cool. Yeah.
Or like maybe there like if there's like a sword based enemy and like you go up to it, you have like a rock paper scissors moment where you can
Yeah.
something like, I think that could be cool. I think that that'd be ideal because it adds a little bit more to that. And like again, you see this sort of with Persona where you can choose to ambush enemies or just run into them, which the former is always preferable to the latter. What else? Oh yeah, so then there'd be that, but there'd also be more forced encounters. And you do see forced encounters in something like Dragon Quest XI with mimics, but I'm talking about like, events. Like you can't pass this threshold without fighting something or something like that. And
I'm not, I'm not
maybe
sure if
for
you've
those, sorry, go ahead.
I'm not sure. Have you played Tales of Zillia 2?
No, that's one
No.
of the no, I have not.
There's so those games have on-screen encounters, but there's a very weird mechanic in that game. That's like the major divisive point where you have like a fucking debt to pay off in that game, and
Hmm.
they wall you from going to new areas until you pay that debt. So you have to like do like fights and shit to like they kind of make you do shit to get over that debt wall.
Interesting.
Mm.
That's actually really cool. I've heard good things about that one, but I have yet to play it, sadly.
Someday, if they ever bring it over.
One day. Yeah. I will go through the whole Tales series eventually. I just like I sleep through those games. I know you like them. I'm sorry. Uh, I kind of sleep through
I
those
get it.
games. Hmm. Uh, but I do think, that they're good to bring up because I think that they do encounters pretty well. I definitely think that they do because it's sort of a mix. I don't know about Braziria or Zestiria
It's
or
all the
even
same.
how pretty
Like
much the same thing.
they all have enemies on the map, and then you just like go into them, and then it happens.
Word. Okay, so yeah, same thing. I think they do it pretty well for sure. I think
Yeah.
it's a good balance because it and in those games like, but see, I feel like with games like Tales, like sometimes the battles are kind of the meat of the game to me. Like that's where I want. Like if I'm playing an RPG and I want to get into battles, then I know its battle systems are good,
Yeah.
right? But it's funny because with with Tales, like I'll like feel it real good for like an hour, and then I'll be like, I
Mhm.
don't give a fuck. I'm getting sick of juggling. I just don't care. And then, which I don't know. I guess I'm contradictory. Uh,
Tales feel like they feel like half fighting games almost in like a weird way.
yeah, they do. But in a way that I don't like.
Hmm.
I don't know how to describe it. And I love fighting games. Um, it's like I don't know, like Fantasia I can really kind of give the pass to because it was so
Yeah,
early in the series,
yeah.
that like
I yeah.
the jank didn't feel as bad,
Mhm.
kind of, maybe. I don't know. But like I don't know. At the same time, games. Okay, so Bravely Default 2 is a really good example of this, where it has on-map encounters that actually there's a level of dynamism to that too. Because, so if enemies on the map, have you played BD2 yet? I forgot. Oh yeah, you did.
Yeah, I do.
So for those of you who don't know, it has like this mechanic where it's on map encounters, but if two enemies are close together, you fight a chain battle, and you get bigger rewards depending on how big the chain is. So ideally, if you're trying to grind or level up or whatever, you want to fight the biggest chain you can get, which requires you to basically become a shepherd and herd enemies together, right? So that's pretty awesome, and I like it's weird because I was like actively looking to fight stuff in Bravely Default 2, yet the game is just so middling to me that it's kind of contradictory because it checks all my boxes. It does the thing that I just said where I was trying to get into battles as much as I could because it was fun, but then like I just felt empty inside.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it like Hmm. Like I found it like pretty addicting because of the how
Oh, it
the
is.
jobs worked, but like
Mm-hmm.
um I think like when like just from me because I play RPGs for like more than the combat, and for
Mm-hmm.
default too, like that would like the combat of that game is kind of the only reason for why I even played it at all. So like it grew kind of hollow the more I went through it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. You know what? I'm not a fan of any of the Bravely stories, to be honest. I think one did the best with it because, well, yes and
One,
no.
yeah, one's fucking weird. One tried to be too weird.
Oh, I like the end. I love the subversions, but I just
Yeah,
think like the payoff isn't worth. It was almost worth the repetition, but not quite.
not
Uh,
quite. Yeah,
but yeah, so it's weird. It's just such a weird thing because I don't know if it's an entitlement thing where I'm getting what I want, but it's just not hitting the spot. It's
is it
like,
like is it because the fights are like too spammy to win? Like there's like no because like if you're doing the because like
hmm.
if you're farming, like it's just kind of like spam brave. That's it. You're done. Let's go again. Like that's pretty much all it is if you're doing the farm. So
Yeah, but it's funny because it's like, so Bravely Default's like challenge or whatever is like engaging to me, where like the bosses you can't just spam fight to win. And I think a
yeah.
lot of there's a lot of discourse about Bravely Default 2 being really hard, and I don't know who fucking perpetuated that. And I think it's because there's not as much player control. Like there you can't turn off random encounters, and the bosses have a kind of RNG element with the countering system, which is annoying as hell. And I agree that may
Countering is
not
really
be
annoying. Yeah,
it
yeah.
may not be
It's
the
it's really annoying.
best design, but at the same time, I don't know. That game is definitely not hard. Like,
There's so much shit you can exploit in that game. Like you could play through it and not even understand like half the mechanics and kind of like bulldoze through it if you have
right,
the jobs.
more so even than Bravely Default 1, I think.
Yeah.
Even though I think 2 is my favorite in the series. I think it has the best middle ground of everything.
Second?
Yeah.
Second or you mean
No, no,
two?
Bravely
Second?
Default 2.
Okay.
I don't
Yeah.
know if that's like a hot take. I'm just
I
like
don't know if it
kind of so
is.
lukewarm on the series that like I don't know. The most streamlined one seems to work the best for me. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's funny because it's like you have games like that really they hit the spot in theory, but like in execution, I don't know. It just didn't. I didn't really feel that much from it. And you look at that game mechanically, it's definitely more deep than Final Fantasy V or Dragon Quest 3 or Dragon Quest 9. Or I'm just thinking of games with job systems. Real fucking American games where you're working class, you know?
Mm.
You know? So, but yeah, it's definitely more mechanically deep than those games, but I just don't, I don't care. Don't care. I see
Like
that you're more
it
light now, by
probably.
the way. Radiance
Oh
is
yeah,
upon you.
I turn late, yeah. And I'm willing to bet it's like probably like even if you don't really realize it, like you probably just don't care about the cast or whatever's happening at all.
Well, I kind of did. It's
Yeah?
weird, dude.
Really?
I
Okay.
am completely like equivocal with fucking Bravely. I don't know what it is. Like I liked the cast. They did. I mean, they were kind of milk toast, but they weren't bad. You know.
Yeah.
I kind of. I think I liked them more than the first two games, to be honest. Did they have
Really?
better arcs? Probably not. But like, I don't know. They worked for me.
Hmm.
I don't know. But yeah, I don't. I don't like the full control of Bravely 1 and 2. I don't think, or Bravely 1 and Bravely 2nd. I do think that like just being able to turn off encounters is kind of a band-aid fix to
Yeah.
me personally. I
Yeah, it is.
think it's not that I wouldn't say it's lazy by any stretch of the imagination, because they definitely put a lot of thought into doing that. But I just think a game is more engaging when there's more visual and mechanical stimuli to influence encounters, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, so yeah. Here's a question for you.
Mhm.
What
Okay.
could be done with older JRPGs or RPGs in general with random encounters? What could be done with those systems to make them more engaging to you? Because I noticed that you kind of sleep through random encounters for the most part.
Um, just like I don't know if I like sleep through them. Like it depends on the game. Like I think just like having like more stakes in what happens, which is I guess kind of like what Saga does, kind of right, like with
Mm-hmm.
the scaling and
The
the new
LP
techs you
system.
learn. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like those because like the main problem with random encounters, like not just like JRPGs in general, but in games that have random encounters, you don't really have the choice. So like there's always monotony in JRPGs, and like with random fights, you can't like there's no like you can't really escape that at all. So like having more systems to just like play around with and actually affect you just beyond like standard like just like stats and like levels would probably do a lot more. Like Saga does that well, even though I don't really play Saga. Like Saga, like for what it does, it's probably like kind of like the ideal way I could like kind of see it. Um like I'm not like the biggest fan of like scaling like how it is in there and like in FF8, but just like having more systems, just like having jobs, just like managed, just like in FF3 or 5 or um like FF10 too. Like I really love how they like how those jobs work.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's like a lot more at stake than just the standard gold and XP, and that's it.
Oh, for sure. And this is a really good point in the chat here. I like the way the Tails has food and meal stuff, so there's kind
Oh
of a
yeah, yeah,
strat to fixing meals to heal based on what drops. And this is something that you see in all the Falcom games, pretty
yeah.
much.
Falcon has it too. Yeah,
So yeah,
Trails loves that shit.
I think that's sick. I swear to God, I'm not like a or I'm not a Tails hater. I swear, but I'm also not a Tails lover. So take it as you will. Like Nocturne's map, the redder you. Okay, yeah, that's actually good. This is a really good point.
Oh yeah, the
Nocturne's map,
moon.
yeah, where
Yeah,
the redder, the closer you are to an encounter. So there's visual stimuli to show you random
yeah.
encounters. And I real quick, this is probably straying from the point, but I think that you brought up a really good point with the idea of monotony and how it ties to RPGs.
Oh.
And I constantly see this subject be brought up on Twitter and what have you about games should always be fun. They should never be boring. If you're ever bored, you should stop playing the game.
Like, I don't like. I get the idea behind that, but I feel like the people who say that don't play games almost. Like they don't like part of the thing with that ideology is like what like at least to me like what makes games fun like it's like especially with JRPGs is like you trudge through that monotony
Right.
and then you reach a point of like oh shit I've reached this or I've been that like because if it's always fun it's not fun, you know. Like the fun wears off. Like if something always feels the same it's not gonna hit the same as it should when it's supposed to, you know.
Right. And I think that that's the ultimate like casual versus hobbyist argument, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Because like if you're only playing a game 3 hours a week, you know, or
Yeah,
that's
like
like
if
your
you're
average
like
amount of time, yeah,
yeah,
you're
like
probably not
yeah.
going to want it. You know, it's like different strokes for different folks, you know? And I always hear people talk about like how certain games need to be accessible to be fun to everybody. And I don't really think that that's
I don't
true.
think like I don't think like I think the idea of accessibility is like very much overblown. Like at least for people who just don't want to deal with the challenge, like not like I think with Returnal, like that's like been a pretty big point of contention
Hmm.
is like how accessible should that game be? It's like I don't like I don't think when a developer makes something they have to always keep in the back of their mind, oh, I hope like this percentage of people are able to fucking get through it. Like, you know, like just fucking make what you want to make. You know, like I don't think like trying to cater to everyone is gonna really amount to anything. Like weird like sidestep, but
Hmm.
they're so they announced for Sonic they're making
The colors
like
remaster.
they're yeah so they're doing a remaster for Colors, and there was this recent interview with Famitsu with I, with Izuka and someone else on the team, and Izuka's like his main points. So they added like new shit in the remaster to make it easier, right? So
Hmm.
like they took out lives in the remaster, and they added this new mechanic where if you collect these tokens of Tails, if you fall down a pit, he fucking saves you, right? And there's like no way to like turn it off, right?
Okay, yeah, that's bogus.
So like Izuka like he believes that like getting as many fans as possible is the best thing to do, but
Hmm.
because of that like it kind of rids the identity of like what the games have, you know, and that's kind of what, like at least that's why I think like a lot of fans aren't as keen on the games now is because like they're too easy. Like you don't even get a choice in that like mode, you know, like it's just kind of like you just kind of have to like bear through it for the more casual gamers. Like not to sound like like you know an elitist, but it's like if you should be forced to like go like I just don't think it should like it's smart for a
Yeah.
developer to, like try to like band-aid a game to make it a, like more appealing, and like Colors itself is like a fucking like easy game. Like I don't see the point in trying to you know yeah I don't know
Yeah, to make that without having the option to like to add a retroactive mechanic without the option to turn it off is kind of
yeah
bogus, I think. Um, but yeah, I mean, like the idea of like unbridled creativity slash like auteurism. That sounded like that could the way I said that could be misconstrued. Uh, uh, but that concept is a little bit far from sort of what I wanted to grasp for, but like I think in the chat was said best. It's like random encounters being boring versus being boring because they're routine is exactly kind of what it is. And so it's like there's always going to be a baseline of fun that you're sort of having with a game, right? And it's like
Yeah,
you want to keep that baseline as steady as possible. But I
yeah.
mean, if you didn't have encounters that like you didn't want to get into and you only got into encounters that you wanted to get into, then it's just like does like there's not a
Like
lot of
it's
impact.
like I don't think there's a like I don't think people really understand that like you can't really make a JRPG with like and like have like the fucking time of your life like fucking for 100 hours, like
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
really the jar like it's not a game like I don't know like Fury, which I've been playing, right? Like where like each like it's a very short game, but because of how short it is, they fucking like put real like they put a lot of effort into like each individual aspect. So like for that like 5 hour or 6 hour thing, like you could be having fun entire time. But like if you're like playing like a fucking like Persona 5, right? Like
Mhm.
you shouldn't expect to fucking like be like super enthralled or like super like
Right.
into what's happening like all the time, because at that point like it's gonna hit a plateau even if you realize it, and you're gonna keep expecting more at some point.
Yeah, so I think we haven't really touched too much on SMT, and I think that could be like the final thing that we go on to because I think it's such a interesting microcosm of this subject. But I think what you're speaking of too, what I see this a problem with this is in FF7 remake. So
Yeah,
FF7 remake has a really good combat system. It's
the
very
combat's so good.
involved. It's
Yeah.
so good, and this is I just always have to preface my opinions on the subject by saying that I didn't want it at all when I first saw it. Even when I first
Mhm.
played it in the demo, I was like, "Fucking I'm old. I'm 30. I hate this." But then, like, I started getting into it, and I really loved it, and there's so much potential in it. But the problem I have with FF7 Remake is the way the combat layout is. So the combat is laid out in a kind of AAA Western
Yeah, yeah,
action
this,
game way, where it's like, you have a dungeon, and in this little spot here, this is always just a Sahagin, and then over here, it's like it just feels like Uncharted Uncharted enemy placement, and so that
yeah,
makes everything very sterile. There's not, I mean, there's randomness to it where if you engage said Sahagin, then maybe it could spawn two more Sahagin, maybe it'll spawn like a big shark enemy, but like for the most part, the layout of enemy design in that game is too meticulous to the point
yeah.
where it just doesn't have that
That's
classic feel.
that's kind of why like I haven't really like felt any desire to replay it. It's like because it's they've done so much to make it like as like streamlined as well. Not
Yeah.
really like they've like put a lot of detail into like what each like screen of the game is. Like it's gonna
Right.
feel the same each time you play through it, which is kind of like why I prefer like some other Square games where it's like, oh, like even if it's fucking like designed like ass, like, oh, I could play it differently now, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think that's a complaint a lot of people have. Um, it's cinematic in a way that I don't think is conducive to multiple playthroughs.
Yeah,
Um, we were talking about this on Twitter the other day of like replay value versus replayability. And I think that FF7 has a lot of replay value but very low replayability. I mean,
yeah.
it has
Which
like an
yeah,
okay amount of replay value. I'll
I don't
say
think
that.
that's like a bad thing either, because like they have the hard mode, and that's like a pretty like drastic shift from how the game normally is. And so
Right.
like I don't think it really like has like I don't think it has to have like like to have replay ability, but like it's also like in well, like in the future, like I don't see
Mhm.
myself thinking like, oh man, I gotta fucking replay Seven Remake again. You know, like
Right, like I'm not like okay, it's not something that like I couldn't do because like because Intergrade's coming out in a couple days, and I wanted to replay it maybe with the new visuals, but I'm like,
yeah,
do I really like? I've already
yeah,
because it's like I don't know, but like I think it could. It's a difficult subject with this game too because I don't know how remake part two is going to be. It's very contingent about how remake
yeah.
part
Like
two is.
Remake Part Two is like really fucking weird to me because I have no idea like if they're gonna like do like a real like fucking world map or if it's gonna
Yeah,
or, or if they're gonna just like because I think I'm like at the end of like disc one or something. Like I'm like right before the Temple of the Ancients. I got
yeah, you're
Sid.
right to that.
Um so like I kind of have a good feel of how the world map is and like it kind of feels like superficial, like kinda.
Yeah,
Because like there's like some sort of like because there are some like optional quests and stuff like for Condor. I think that's optional, right? No, I'm not sure.
yeah. Well, it's optional to the point of the huge materia, but I don't. You don't actually have to win anything.
Oh, okay, yeah. So like, there's like small areas like those where they might have like a very like brief open section, but like I think they can just kind of do how they did part one, where they just kind of like throw you from one place to the next
Hmm.
because that's how the story works. Like you don't like there's no real reason to have the world map because you don't really have to explore in that game.
Right, and it's like it's difficult to say because like the Midgar section in the original was very linear.
Yeah,
Was it as linear as the remake? No way, but like it was still like you didn't have freedom really. There was very little freedom. But the thing is that I think with random encounters, it added a level of that of sort of openness or spontaneity that doesn't really exist in the remake, right? And I think
yeah.
this is why I brought this up because that's like an essential one of my biggest complaints about the remake that the original had. It had so much more like it just felt like stakes were a little higher in between battles, and the remake tried to combat this
Yeah.
by adding hard mode and making things where you had to sort
I
of pay
also
more
feel
attention.
like I kind of feel like the OG 7 has more like like there's a lot more you could do with the combat in that game compared to 7 remake, like um because in remake like because of it being like half action, half command, whatever, like they everyone kind of plays the same, like the way they swing, the way they fight, and the only real change is like what you have equipped, and like the spells they have. But because the OG 7 is purely turn-based, like there's a lot more liberties they took. So like entire builds could be like changed on characters, and they could play completely differently from how they would, in like 7 remake.
See, I kind of disagree because I think seven original everyone ends up
Mhm.
being the same thing with different limit breaks. I mean,
Really?
there's base stats. You have
Yeah.
base stats that vary. But everyone just has the same exact like you can homogenize characters so easily in that.
Mhm.
But with FF7 remake, I mean, I don't think FF7 remake is like hugely different, but like between characters. But like okay, for the best example of this is like how you build up ATB. Barrett builds up ATB super slowly. So I feel like you want to have him more as like a character like a spot hitter where you switch into him to do his heavy attack and then you switch out because the computer's stupid. And then
Yeah.
like Tifa builds up her ATB super fucking fast, and then Cloud is like in the middle, and Aerith is like Aerith, sorry, and Aerith is like kind of low to middle. So it's like that did add a lot of dynamism, and I think you're gonna see that more with the next parts when they put in more characters. But yeah, I don't think that there really was enough there for sure. But I don't know like I do feel like the way that this affected encounters in FF7 Remake was that it made it so why would you not use triple slash? You know,
Yeah.
like what is the you gonna sit there gonna buff up your characters for what? When you can just use Cloud's triple slash and then like even on hard mode, literally even on hard mode, you just like if you sit and you fight encounters, that game is gonna be hard as hell. But if you just use triple slash, 90% of the encounters get
Yeah.
blasted. So I mean not bosses, but yeah. So it's just like the road to perfect encounter design has not been paved yet. We're close. We're getting there. We're getting a good syntax with it. What else? Oh, let's shift to SMT a little bit because I think SMT is a really good talking point for this subject. Because SMT, I think more so than any other JRPG series, has the element of like dangerous encounters, very dangerous encounters, and sometimes that's bullshit because sometimes it's Persona 3 where you just get instant death and you have nothing to avoid it yet, which sucks. I don't think that necessarily adds difficulty, just annoying, you know, just, you know, almost RNG based. My dog is here. But like at the same time, there are, for the most part, SMT does a good job of this, where it's like, okay, now you're fighting the pixie, who gives a shit, and then it's like, whoa, there's a matador.
Oh no.
He's gonna beat my ass, and so like,
I fucking bought the remaster for Nocturne.
I haven't finished it yet.
Oh boy.
I haven't finished. How are you liking it?
No, it's coming tomorrow.
Oh, you haven't got okay. I don't like. I think it's kind of. It's baffling that it turned out technically the way that it did, and some of the technical.
I got it for like 30 something. I wasn't gonna pay fucking full price for what they did to it.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I can't believe how they handle the DLC in that game.
Yeah, no, that's super dystopian, but yeah, I mean, like even Nocturne is like Nocturne to me has some of the best encounter design in JRPG history because you know it's not just straight random encounters, and I don't mean that just based on the RNG. But you know it has like the elements of the moon, all that kind of stuff that tie into how often you get into encounters and which ones that you get into.
Yeah.
So, you know, like that adds a lot of danger to your dungeon crawling, and not just your dungeon crawling, but just like your area, just moving through areas in that game. It can be really, really spooky. So, you know, and you see this in ARPGs with Dark Souls and Neo and stuff like this, where the enemy design is designed in such a way where you can't really run willy-nilly into stuff without being super careful. And I think that that kind of reflects the idea that SMT like really kind of refined about like catharsis between each encounter and the constant danger, right? Because like you could run from encounters or try to avoid them in a Souls like, but then you run the risk of like, you know, accidentally aggroing too many enemies and getting blasted, and it's sort of similar to random encounters in that sense, where if you're just trying to like rush through stuff and not pay attention, you get overwhelmed very quickly. So yeah, I don't know. I think we're starting to see more of that approach in RPGs, but then something like FF7 Remake comes along and it kind of like distracts itself with its own like its inspirations, I guess, with the whole Western influence. But so I don't know, because like FF16, it's looking like it's going to be a mix of 15 and 7 remake, right? And
This
I don't
looks
know.
like fucking DMC to me. That's what it looks like to me, just DMC.
which is cool. I mean,
Yeah.
DMC. I don't know how well that would translate to Final Fantasy, but like I'm open to it for sure because I feel like they wanted to do that with 15. You know what? 15 is a really good talking point for this because
Uh,
15 like basically has 15 has kind of random encounters with like the on map stuff that could happen, like the
yeah.
Imperial warships that drop or the robots and stuff that wanders around. And
Yeah.
you kind of see this in Xenoblade as well, that kind of like event based encounters. I just, I don't, I think that's great in theory, but the battles 15 just.
15, man, I don't fucking know what the hell that combat even was, honestly speaking. I don't know what that was. I don't even recall
Yeah,
because like I played it on I played it on launch day and
same.
like I played it and like I don't really recall like what the combat was, to be honest with you. Like I just recall kind of like dodging sometimes and like using a spell and like that was kind of it from what I remember of 15.
Right, and like that correlates to encounter design by just making everything kind of samey and homogenized. And it's
Mm,
like, it offers you these myriad of options, and it ends up being the action RPG equivalent of spamming fight
yeah.
over and over again, and we don't want that. We can
15
move
like
past that.
the the tagline for that game was a Final Fantasy for beginners and veterans.
Yeah,
And
yeah, newcomers or
they
whatever.
kind of shot themselves in the foot there.
Yeah, but you know what? I have seen a lot of people say that they got into the series from 15.
A lot of people like 15. Yeah.
That's weird. I mean, I don't hate it. I just hate the combat. Like, I
I
I
just
I don't know.
I
It's
didn't
funny because
really
I have so many buts about that game. Maybe one day that's a potential
I
podcast.
just my biggest problem with that game was like because I followed that shit since like the fucking first is 13 days. So like I had like Kingdom Hearts levels of hype for 15 and like my main regret with that game was playing it on launch day because like they've added so much shit to 15 like they've added all that DLC like you're able to play as other characters now and shit like they've added so much shit to that game and like I feel like if the game launched with all that like it would be pretty fucking good
Yeah, I don't
because
think
I
it
yeah
changes the fundamental like game experience though with that game. Oh no, we're talking about 15 in the chat. Uh I don't think it fundamentally changes the experience, but it just kind of adds flourishes and stuff to the combat that should have definitely been there from the beginning. But like, it's all kind of stuff that, for all intents and purposes, has very little effect
yeah
on what the combat ends up being and what the gameplay loop ends up being and feeling like. And I think that like that goes back to the point that we were making before about retroactively adding or changing encounter based mechanics in games that have already been released, and it's just interesting how that was like happening in real time. Like
mm.
going through it. So uh yeah, I don't want to get on too much of a soapbox with 15 though, because it's a loaded potato subject.
Geez I 15 is like I feel kind of bad that they stopped to like doing shit for it because they like stopped like midway with the
Yeah.
DLC. But I'm also like, thank fucking God it's done.
Yeah, I mean that's how I feel too. I think there's something kind of awesome about leaving things a little ambiguous in the way that the novel, because the novel is basically what the story was in
Oh
the
yeah,
DLC.
yeah, yeah,
Um, in a way, I'm kind of like, I think the game drops enough hints to tell you what happens in that DLC without having to show you it, and I think that it's better for it that
yeah.
way. So it doesn't feel totally off. I don't feel incomplete without the DLC that they had planned, at least story wise. But yeah, that's such a frustrating topic for me. I get so like unbelievably annoyed just thinking about the way that game was handled and whatever. So
The team was
But
like a fucking hell to develop. Yeah.
yeah, I could only imagine. So, OJ, what are our final thoughts on random encounters here? Have you thought differently about them in this discussion?
Like I really like your points about how well I like how we talked about I think how Bravely and Xenoblade do it are probably my sweet spots. Like where
Mm-hmm.
like I prefer having that control, but it's also like there's also like bits of design where the game can surprise you. So we don't fall into like a state of lethargy where it's like the randomness just kind of feels superficial. You know, like SMT, like I haven't played too much SMT, but like the idea of just having constant like be on your toes, be prepared, like that actually makes the randomness feel worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
Even like it's like a very like weird double-edged sword because like when I so like when I see people complain about games sometimes, like one of the problems that I see, just like generally speaking, is like a lack of consistency, right? Like people like consistency, but in the case of turn-based art, like with like turn-based art, RPGs, it's like what people want to be consistent isn't really like always like it like it's not always equal. Like some
Yeah.
people want the encounter rates to be the same, like they want the challenges to be the same. Like there's a lot you could do with it to make it like more accommodating to somebody, but I think just like generally speaking, just like having the option to like even though I'm not like the biggest fan of it, like like just kind of like suck it up, like just having the options to like adjust encounter rate and like kind of having someone like build their own like experience that way. But then it's also like if the game is even like built well around that, you know, like with like Bravely, where because of how much shit you could level up in that game, like having the option to like turn shit off, like it kind of makes sense because it gives you that edge if you really want it. But like if it's like oh, like with like Dragon Quest 11, I'm like kind of mixed on it because
Mm.
the majority of those fights just don't feel like they have any like real sense, you know? So I'm like still kind of like in that, you know, like trying to see which is really the best, you know?
Yeah, dude, I don't know how we got this far without even talking about Chrono Trigger.
Oh, Chrono Trigger. Oh yeah, that is random. I didn't even think about Chrono Trigger.
Mm. I think it's
Well,
because I think Chrono Trigger kind of did everything that we're saying. It added different AI for some specific enemies. It had
yeah.
some forced encounters, and then it had mostly on map encounters that you could theoretically avoid.
Yeah, that game was really ahead of its time now that I really think about it, like
Yeah,
holy shit.
yeah. I mean, it was like everything that Final Fantasy Saga and Dragon Quest were doing just rolled into one. Um,
Mhm.
in terms of that, I think it had a good design. My only problem with it is I don't think the combat in Chrono Trigger is like incredibly deep, and
It's
so
not. It's not.
and
It's not
and
that
that's
deep.
fine. Like that's fine, but like it's. Yeah, I just think it needed a little bit more oomph to the battle system. I think that's my biggest complaint with the whole game. Because Chrono Trigger is like one of my favorite JRPGs ever, if not maybe top three. Someone says you couldn't avoid them reliably.
No,
Uh,
there's so like in some of the maps for Chrono Trigger, like there's specific encounter places. So like say there's like a so like say there's like a branching path that like took you to the same spot, like and if you walk right, that would always spawn a fight. Like there were parts of the maps where they were guaranteed
right,
to make
just
you spawn,
encounters.
and you were
Mhm.
you were still able to avoid them if you knew the maps.
Right, and like there are some that you can't. I don't know what a number is. I'm just gonna throw it off the top of my head. I would say it's like 75% avoidable and 25% fixed. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's how it feels to me. Combat is fast and inoffensive. And Chrono Trigger, are you playing the same game?
Welcome.
No, he said combat is fast and inoffensive. Huh? Are you talking about like inoffensive, like, oh, like just straightforward? I thought you meant like unoffensive, like defensive. Okay, yeah, I get that.
Oh.
Yeah, all right.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that make if you're
Okay.
saying that the combat was just inoffensive in like it's safe. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, there's a lot of tight corridors and stuff, but I mean, consider the context of when that was made. That was made for the Super Nintendo, and compare Chrono Trigger's on-map encounters to Saga, and Chrono Triggers are a lot more refined. They're a lot more. They're a lot less jumpy, I think, than the three
Yeah.
Romancing Saga games, especially 2 and 1. Yeah, you can make a case for 3, but also there was a lot less encounters in Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger tried to do like beefier encounters, and it didn't end up becoming a thing super well. But like they tried to add like dynamic enemies, like enemies that like would don a shield, and then you have to like hit them with something for them to drop the shield. But the game ends up being so unscaled and easy that like you don't even
Yeah.
have to do that.
Like there was like one specific part in that game where I was like, holy shit, this is really fucking cool. Where like these like guys like they held a shield, and if you use fire, so like there were like two types of the enemy, and you would like run into like one that was just like barehanded, and one that had a shield. And if you use fire on the one that had a shield, it would become the barehanded type. And I was like, holy
Right.
shit, that's really fucking cool. And like that was like the only time the game did that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah, I wish there was more stuff like that that actually required you to do that. And I feel like you just get overpowered so fast in that game. Like, it's like,
It's a very, very easy game. Yeah.
yeah. And again, it doesn't have to be hard. I mean, the difficulty in that game is sort of, doing stuff like the developer room ending. And that's a very much like a self-imposed kind of challenge in a way. But yeah, no, just to reiterate, like I wasn't trying to say that Chrono Trigger was like the best example of like an ideal encounter system, but I think it's up there for sure.
It's up there, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. Again, if I had to say one game, I would say the best balance of like a traditional turn-based game with this would probably be Dragon Quest 11.
Yeah.
Just off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
that's fair. Yeah.
Even if the encounters themselves weren't always the best, like the actual system for which you get into encounters is sick. All right, probably should wrap it up here. OJ, you want to say anything before any topics that you wanted to just quickly broach before we call
What do you think Square's gonna show at E3?
Oh yeah, that was an original topic, huh? A little bit of FF16, some Endwalker stuff, maybe a new IP, and Babylon's Fall a little bit. I think we're gonna get very little of each of these things, and then probably a remaster. I don't know what though. It could be an older game. It could be like a PS2 era game. Like that's not older. It could be like a PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 era. I don't know. Maybe it's another saga. Maybe it's whatever.
They've been on that saga grind. For a while.
Yeah, I wonder like who Kawazu paid. Like I wonder
The way like Saga has been like fucking like being almost like milked. Like it's very bizarre to me because I still feel like it's very, very niche, and like the output of the games is like fucking wild.
Oh yeah. I really want that. I really want that a lot. What about you, man? What are you expecting?
Oh
wait, no, Origin too. The supposed.
yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like kind of guaranteed at this point. Like, there's so many insiders that are like kind of baking on that happening. I wonder like how it's gonna fucking look. Like
Yeah.
fucking like I'm imagining like the Warrior of Light and like 3D, and you're in a fucking like Dark Souls cave or something. That's what I'm imagining.
What if it's
That's
just
what I'm
like
thinking
a
about.
1-to-1 remake of it, like just Dark Souls with Final Fantasy? It's like a Dark Souls fan mod.
Oh my god.
Oh man, and Unlimited Saga port. That's what we're gonna see. You know, they did.
Yeah.
He did. Kawazu did say that they were planning to remaster all the old games, so that probably will come at some
Wow.
point. Uh,
How many more Saga games have to come over?
Unlimited. How many games that weren't released in the West?
No, just like
Oh,
which
how
ones
many have? Oh,
haven't been
Saga
remastered yet?
Frontier 2, Unlimited Saga, Romancing Saga 1, and its remake Minstrel Song. Uh, and then like the DS and
Okay.
Wonder Swan remakes of Saga 1, 2, and 3. So Wonder Swan
Wow.
remake of 1, DS remakes of 2 and 3. I don't think we're going to
That's
see that
okay.
latter those latter games though.
They're gonna be on that fucking grind for a good few years.
Yeah, I think it's been doing pretty well. So that's what I'm hoping.
Mhm.
Yeah, sorry. Anything else that you were expecting from Square?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm a Kingdom Hearts fan, so you
Mm,
know the obvious. Aside from that, I feel like they kind of have to show some 16.
yeah, it's
Like
got to be something.
they
It's got to
gotta
be
show,
some.
yeah. Like I'm not sure if Sony's gonna um have their like own thing because that's a PS5 game.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if they're gonna
that's a
have
good
like their
point.
only. So like if they, well, in fact, like if Sony has their own thing at some point in the summer, like that might be where they show off like the Final Fantasy Dark Souls game or
Hmm.
7R Part 2 or 16. Like there's a like Square's been like really like kind of like honed in on to PS like 5 stuff.
Yeah, which I think is kind of good because it gives like it kind of it harkens back to the PS1 days.
Yeah,
Um,
a little bit, yeah.
I'm not one of those people who think that like games need to be on all systems because like I think that I mean ideally sure yeah that would be awesome but like I don't know, man.
And
The way that the world works, I just don't know if it's like possible. Plus, it's like it's kind of cool just to have different flavors. You know, like
like, I see it as like each platform having its own I like it's having its own identity kind of, like
yeah,
um I don't know, like so yeah, like I mean there's also that one's fault. I have no idea what that game it like even is.
yeah.
What what the game
We
it is.
shall see. We shall definitely see. We will reconvene after E3 because
Oh
I think
yeah,
it's
we
going to
can,
be
yeah.
interesting. Probably going to be a lot of information. I'm
Mhm.
expecting a Secret of Evermore full remake, AAA remake. I
AAA
don't think,
remake.
yeah, AAA remake.
Oh shit.
Completely, yeah, completely redone.
Really?
I don't think that that's too far off. No, that's never gonna happen. I would be surprised if we ever got a port of that game. Like, let alone like Evermore
I forgot
is
all about
awesome.
this.
I love
I
it.
forgot all about this game. Huh?
The game fucking rules. You should play it if you have not. Kind of tough to get into, but oh man, that game slaps. Okay,
I've yeah.
I think that's we're running a little bit high on time. Hey, thanks again, man, for joining me. It's always awesome chatting with you. Do
Yeah,
you
man.
want to
Sure.
remind everyone where we can find you or what your
Oh
contact
yeah.
info is?
So I have a Twitch channel that I sometimes stream on. I've started to I've begun blind playthroughs of Sonic Adventure and of Castlevania
Fishing.
Aria of Sorrow.
Nice.
Um I have a YouTube. I don't really do much there, but I write for KH13. It's a Kingdom Hearts fan site for news and stuff, and I'm also a reviewer and news writer for Noisy Pixel, which is a gaming site. Like we do like reviews, opinion stuff, and all of that jazz. So you could read my stuff there if you'd like.
And I will put all those links in the description once this video is uploaded to as a VOD. As always, you can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/podcastjump, Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and obviously Twitch, where this is streaming and where these Sidequest series have been streaming. That's about it. I was thinking about maybe streaming Dragon Quest 3 sometime soon, but I just replayed it, so I don't know.
You fucking love that game, right?
I love that game, yeah, but I still get lost because I'm a dumbass. I'm a dumbass. My girlfriend is playing through FF7 right now, and I've played through that game probably 12 times, and I still like get things confused that are super obvious. I swear Vincent had a triple materia growth weapon, and I was wrong. I swear he did. I've literally farmed all the achievements for that 3 times, and I like that means mastering every materia. I should fucking know this. Stream 7? No, wait, is that 7 or 8? I can't see. No, 7. You don't want to watch me. I don't think I'm like fun to watch these games. I don't know. Oh, DQ7? No, fuck you. I'm not streaming Dragon Quest 7. First of all, I have to get unless I emulate it, I have to get like a capture card for the 3DS, and that's not going to happen. Plus, Dragon Quest 7, I'm not going to watch. Of course not. That's like the most boring game to watch. I don't think.
Is it really?
Dragon Quest 7 is like 100 hours critical path, and it's
holy shit, really?
Yeah, it's like I love it, but it's the driest Dragon. It's definitely the driest Dragon Quest. I mean, it has moments like emotionally that hit, but like I don't think very much Dragon Quest is very fun to watch. You know what? Maybe I'll stream Dragon Quest 1 because I could probably beat that game in like 4 or 5 hours, and I think that might be fun. But,
the ease 1 of Dragon Quest.
Speed run of DQ7 is 14 hours.
Oh my.
You know what? That's funny because I made a tweet about this. I was like, I wonder like what a speed run for Dragon Quest 7 would be like. What the fastest possible time. But yeah, sorry, I went off at a tangent at the end there. Thanks again, everybody, for listening and for tuning in and keeping the chat alive. OJ, thanks again, man, for joining me. And we'll see you soon, hopefully, again, right?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right, well, and take care, everyone, and thanks again.